Welcome to the Big Question podcast, brought to you by Brook Street, part of the leading global workforce solutions company, Manpower Group. This podcast will feature a blend of interviews and discussions with leading experts. This will include academics and thought leaders sharing their perspectives on the ever-changing world of work.
In today's episode, we address a shift that has undeniably impacted the world of customer service. The transition from traditional in-house contact centers to virtual networks of customer interaction. This seismic change doesn't come without its fair share of challenges, from managing remote teams to overseeing operations across time zones. Interestingly, recent statistics show that over 71% of UK contact centres are now adopting some element of home working, with around half of these considering a hybrid model in the long term. A clear indication that the customer service landscape is transforming at an unprecedented speed. With that shift towards virtual contact centres being at the core of this change. Navigating this new landscape, though, brings about exceptional opportunities. It breaks down geographical barriers and facilitates access to broader talent pool. It requires deploying new technologies for efficient remote operations, thus embarking on a journey of digital transformation. So joining us today to delve into these complexities is an industry thought leader who's at the forefront of this transformation. Chris Souza, Director, Global Technology Operations at CGI. Chris, welcome. Before we dive deep into this discussion, though, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi Reese. I've been really privileged to have a phenomenal career and a really exciting career operating for the last 26 years in the contact center industry, from the days when we took two tins and attached them together by a bit of string, to obviously now the contact center industry has become very much a technology-driven industry. But I've worked for some amazing companies. Most recently, before CGI, I was at MasterCard. I used to run the contact center and customer experience for the iconic Boris bikes in London, and I've got some sort of global reach as well. So sort of South Africa, Philippines, India. So yeah, I'm privileged to have had a great career, and it's fantastic to have the opportunity to join you and sort of talk about very much a hot topic for our industry at the moment.
And you mentioned it's a hot topic. So how do you perceive the transition from traditional to virtual contact centers?
I think anyone who thinks about this is concerned about it because it's happening very quickly, and I think it's happening in a reactionary manner, without us properly understanding the repercussions of what this actually means. I go back to 2020. We were about 3 weeks into the pandemic. We'd all managed to get our agents to work from home in some shape or form. We deployed our remote working strategies for whatever that they actually, were. And I remember someone calling me up. I was on my government-sanctioned walk at the time, and one of the vendors that I knew called me and said, "Hey, Chris, what do you think about the new world?" And I sort of stopped in my tracks almost and said to him, what do you mean new world? Because we're going to work from home from now on. The contact center is finished the way that you recognize it, where everyone went to an office, spent 8 or 9 hours there, and then went home again. Hybrid working or remote working is going to be the future. And I went, okay, right, I hear what you're saying, but if you go back probably 2 months prior to that conversation happening, before there was a pandemic, the idea of a contact center being remote was completely alien. There were pockets of people who had, from a resourcing perspective, to support the resourcing, particularly out of hours or things like that, would have some home workers. Particularly also supporting people who may have disability or couldn't get to the office. So it wasn't unheard of, but it wasn't the norm. And What I'm trying to figure out, when we talk to people, is what is the actual motivation, and what do we gain from having home workers? And you alluded to some of that right at the start, with a wider talent pool, being able to sort of recruit not just from your local geographic area, but you can move, essentially globally if you really wanted to. But then what is it you don't get from having your workers at home? So that things like company culture, things like sort of that sort of ongoing support. There was a survey just recently, for example, where the survey looked at where people were actually working. Now I'm lucky, right? So I'm sitting in my almost purpose-built office. I can close my door and I've got peace to work in a really nice environment. It's something like 70+% of contact center home workers are working in communal areas, right? So they might be working in the kitchen or their living room, and just the demographic typically could be sharing a house with other younger people, so they don't have that unique area. And I think probably the most worrying one is where people are working in their bedrooms, so their commute is out of bed to the desk on the other side of the room. So I think there is risk involved with that, and it then becomes very much the business that's employing these folk to make sure that the well-being, which again has become right front of mind within our industry, is properly implemented, and also that the knowledge, the support, all of those good things which are really important within that contact center world, is being delivered properly. And I'm not sure we've quite understood the dynamics and the mechanics of doing that well within the industry at the moment.
Chris, I was going to go on to ask you about some of the immediate challenges faced in this process, but you've already highlighted some of them there. Can you think of some of the potential solutions to those challenges, and how can companies leverage these, opportunities really to their advantage?
I think obviously technology is, well, I said right at the beginning, technology is at the forefront now of our organization, and a lot of businesses are thinking about how can we involve our employees, our colleagues, in that tech. So gamification, for example, which was around before the pandemic and before all this began, has become very much again front of mind. That employee or colleague engagement piece. So you've got someone, as I say, who's working at home. How do you keep them involved in what's going on when knowledge changes? How do you keep them up to speed? How do you make sure that their own personal frames of mind are reflective of what the business wants to deliver from a customer experience perspective, as well as importantly their own well-being? So there's lots of that around. But I think, again, it's down to how well we execute and deploy those technologies, because there's tons of it. There are absolutely tons of it, from, CCaaS, cloud-based contact center solutions, as mentioned, gamification, training, knowledge management, agent assist. There's all of this around. But I think that you've got to sit back almost and go, well, what is my strategy before you even get involved with the technology? Colleagues of mine will hear me use this analogy when we start talking about this. I say, well, I could go down to B&Q and I can go and buy a hammer and a chisel and a plane and some screws, come back and go, right, what should I do with this? And actually what I want to do is put a shelf up, and I need some raw plugs. So the tools exist, and I think we can all be quite satisfied that there are plenty of tools out there which will deliver what we want, but we've got to be really clear about that bit. What is it we want? What is it our agents need from us as a business to support them well, to make sure all the things I've just said happen? But we're also deploying the right solutions to them. So I think that from my perspective, I think is something which, again, we're all trying to navigate through, bearing in mind that all this happened, 2 years ago, a year ago, we came out of it. It's not that long, and we're trying to reshape an entire global industry overnight. And I think that sort of sitting back and going, what is it we're trying to achieve? And also, don't forget, in all these conversations, we've got to think about the end customer, whether that be a consumer or business. Because I was at an event maybe a couple, 2 or 3 months ago, and you had your usual blend of contact center technology providers and end users, so those that are running operationally the contact center. And we listened to a few vendors talking about AI is the hot topic again. Everyone's AI is going to take over this. Well, okay, we can debate that one later perhaps, but I think the reality is that there's more, as I said, there's more technology that's in this industry than there's ever been before. If you ask the average consumer, what do they think about the customer experience they're getting from whoever they happen to be dealing with? Most people will say it's not very good anymore. And what I'm trying to work out actually is how much that is impacted. Is that a UK oriented situation, or is that something which is reflecting globally? And I do talk to folk in some of the other countries where I've interacted, and I've phoned up people in Ireland, in Bulgaria, and as I mentioned, India, South Africa, and others. And the employee engagement going into attrition, having difficulty recruiting into our industry, people are telling me is not as difficult or as painful as we are perhaps seeing in this country. And you kind of have to wonder what's going on there. And you're going to ask me what I think. And I suspect that part of it is this balance between technology and the human being and the processes that go with it. And you consider that I've already alluded to that we're getting perhaps not the strongest deployment and execution of some of the technology solutions that are out there. Simply because I think people don't properly understand some of those technology solutions. There's a repercussion at the end. So you can have a customer can phone up. You're driving self-service. So the first thing a lot of businesses will do, if someone phones up, they'll say, okay, did you know that 95% of inquiries can be handled online? Would you like us to send you a link? And there's people who are being pushed around these different self-service technologies, whether website or bot or AI, and they don't necessarily, if they don't get what they want, the end point of that is your agent, right? And the agent is now fully facing the frustrations that all of that stuff that's happened that we've, as an industry, has inflicted upon our customers, right? The agent takes the brunt of that. And I was talking at a major bank. I was chatting with an agent. I happened to call him because I just needed to ask him a question about my payment card. And he answered it within seconds. I'd been on 40 minutes, by the way, on hold to try and get through with all the various different permutations of what that IVR was throwing at me. So I just said to him, I said, how's your day been? And he says, not very good. I said, actually, Mr. De Souza, you're the first person that's actually been friendly to me today. And I'd phoned him about 2:00. He'd been on shift since 8. And I said, what's that? And he goes, it's all this stuff that happens in the background. But by the time they get to what I've just said, then they're frustrated. They shout at me. I don't deserve to be shouted at. And then I suppose when you consider you can go and do a whole heap of other things and not have to get shouted at, well, you can perhaps start beginning to understand why agents are going, well, actually, you know what, contact center, is it really for me? Do I really want to do this? Layer on top what people talk about, Generation X, Generation Y, not wanting to talk, wanting to do, I think we're creating a bit of a perfect storm almost, which is self-perpetuating the issues that we're seeing.
Interesting you talk about that and the different generations as well, because actually I know I'm a very human person. I like human interaction. I like to be able to speak to someone and actually have that conversation to help me through my issues. And I can sense the frustrations through going through all of the different chatbots, and you can resolve this online. But there are some vital technologies and tools that can facilitate the functioning of a virtual contact center. How significant are some of them, and why are they so significant as well?
Obviously, cloud and everything is now being based on that platform of so you haven't got that physical on-prem limitation that that pre-pandemic actually that was quite prevalent. We just started moving stuff into the clouds before the pandemic, and this massively accelerated that change. I don't know many vendors, or if any vendors, that are talking now about on-prem, putting a piece of tin into a server room and connecting it up with some wires. It's all about being in the cloud, which does help, right? So all that trying to connect someone to a piece of kit sitting in your server room when they're sitting at home somewhere is very, very difficult and problematic. And actually, because it doesn't work and it was never designed to work in that manner, what you find is that those problems with being able to hear your caller, for example, or that connectivity doesn't work as well. So you end up, again, generating the frustration. So the way the technology now is being designed, and with that cloud base layer, is certainly facilitating that. And it does, and really and truly now, number one thing is that you don't have to be in the office. From a purely technology-based delivery of a customer to your workstation, so to speak, you don't need to be in the office. But again, it comes back to what do you do? What else do you do? How do you adapt your processes? How do you make sure that your teams are properly aware of what's going on around them? How do you get, when they've got someone who's not happy, or when something's gone wrong, how do you push the support back down that line to the customer, to the agent, sorry. But the other thing, of course, is also the one thing I worry that we're losing a little bit with all of this is the ability to understand our businesses. Because the contact center has always been a great place to understand, take a temperature check of what's happening within your business. And people talk about call deflection a lot. That's the word, which I personally can't abide the term call deflection within our industry. Because I can deflect, if you said to me, Reese, help me deflect all my calls, I can do that for you right now. It will take me about 5 minutes, right? We'll just turn your phone lines off. That's job done. But that's not what we're talking about here, right? So the best way to deflect calls is not have your customers call at all in the first place. Therefore, you fix what was causing them to call in the first place. Have you got supplier issues? Have you got, in your delivery chain, so someone's ordered something and it just takes forever, or they're using, the wrong courier company who always lose. I won't mention names, but, during the pandemic, there was one company I never used because 50-60% of my parcels never arrived. But who did I phone? I didn't phone them because I couldn't. I had to phone the organization that I was dealing with, and they're having to deal with an issue which isn't their fault, which they could fix just by doing something different. So all that knowledge and all that absolutely gold dust information that the contact center employees, colleagues know, you need to be able to collect all that and make sure that that's being fed back into the business.
It's interesting, actually. The way you framed it there, actually, the only time you call a contact center or reach out to one of these customer service agents is when you have an issue.
Yeah.
And
you never call to say, what a lovely day I've just had, or
no, you don't do
my box on time. You're not doing that, are you?
You don't. It's only whenever you've actually got an issue. And I can see some of those technologies then really empowering the user, me, as I want to try and resolve my issue. But it's, where I'm trying to go with it is, what strategies can companies use to, you talk there about feeding that back in, and actually, what strategies can companies use to ensure higher quality customer service and customer experience in this fully digital world?
Do you know what I think? I think it's knowing your customer and knowing how your customers want to deal with you. So, lots of people, you used it in the opening to this, we talked about digital transformation. And I challenge that a lot with people. So what do you actually mean by digital transformation? And it's almost like people stop there and look at you and go, well, actually, it means we're going to do self-service, or we're going to do something like, and there's a whole raft of different things people can say to you when you ask them what they mean. But actually, it's, for me, I think that you've got, as a business, your contact center generally, unless you're a BPO, your contact center isn't your core business. It's arguably which again I challenge a little, but it's a cost center to deal with your customers. But take that a stage further, it's a cost center to deal with the inadequacies of your own business. And if you then start looking at, well, what doesn't work? Why are people calling me? And put in place genuine solutions based on root cause as to why people called you in the first place, then you can reduce your calls down and your dissatisfaction down. Because what you end up doing is giving your customers a service or a product that actually works, right? And again, I won't mention names, it's not right to do so, but I have a card which I always use on holiday. This is the card, my go-to card, whenever I'm using it for a number of years now. That organization does not have a contact center. There is no phone number for me to call. So consider that. I'm now taking this card with our holiday money on it, with my 2 kids and my wife, where I've got to make sure they've got a roof over their head and they eat and we're never stranded anywhere. So it's got to work. But what that organization has done is they've gone, right, okay, well, let's do exactly really what we've just talked about. That if I try and put money on that card, it goes on instantly, and I know it's gone instantly, and the app works, and I can see the transactions happening, in real time. So I've got, they've generated, well, the 3 things I think they've generated huge confidence I've got in their organization. I'm advocating them, although I'm not mentioning their names here. I'm a huge advocate of them. And they don't have to go through the costs and the pain of having to deliver a customer experience or a contact center or something similar, because they've gone, you know what, let's just stop here. Let's look at what our business actually is doing. We're in the business of providing a holiday card to someone to be able to go abroad. Having a contact center is a cost which we don't need. So we'll deal with that by making it work. And that for me is beautiful. I just think that's just perfect. And I've seen equivalent companies who go, you know what, we'll now start balancing out the cost of fixing the problem versus, people calling us all the time. So how much does that cost? Plus dissatisfaction, plus churn, plus actually very few organizations will factor in the bad or the badly thought through operational process into how it affects your colleague churn. It is not, you guys work in this industry, how much it costs to recruit someone, opportunity cost, the time to get them up to competency, the time it costs them, and then and all of that is things which could be dealt with if we start looking down our customer journey maps and go, where actually are we getting our issues from? Yes, and I'd say that there's technology that's there to help you, but the self-service piece, everybody, or I say everybody, I'm being a bit general here, but when I want something from an organization, so whether my broadband's not working, or I need to upgrade my phone, or I need to check something with my bank, my go-to point is always to go online. Right, that's the first thing I do. I go online to check. Is there something wrong with the in the local area for my broadband, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time I'm phoning up, right, there's something that's gone wrong with everything else. So then don't tell me to go online, because I must. And actually, what the organisation should be doing is going, right, Chris Souza, we understand his behaviour as a customer. We know he checks. We know he's done this and this and this. So by the time he gets to the point of calling, right, the technology can say, well, we understand this, the profile of him as a customer. And if he's calling, it's something wrong, which we need to react to quickly, and we can make him very happy. Don't throw me into the pot with everybody else, right, where, there is those opportunities there to be able to assist people properly. And I think that's using the technology for a really clear purpose. Right? What is it we're trying to achieve? Where are our pain points? Where can we genuinely push self-service? balance inquiries, right? Well, if someone's phoning up purely to do a balance inquiry for their bank, great, fantastic, right? But I challenge that because having worked within a payment card organization, very, very few people ever call up to find out what their balance is. They might have a consequence. The consequence is they ask what their balance is just because they're there. But then from a customer experience perspective, how you're capturing that? Well, we told them the balance, so they must have been calling about the balance. No, you weren't. They called because I tried to make a payment, the payment didn't go through. Have I got enough money in my account? That wasn't a balance inquiry. That was a failure on the card to make the payment. And again, it's sort of understanding what actually happened and why customers called in the first place, and the proper, as I said earlier, the proper root cause. And the technology can give you that. And there's plenty of knowledge, there's plenty of data. We operate in probably the most data-centric industry there is. I mean, there probably is others that are similar, but contact centers are renowned for the amount of data that we create. And just by starting to go, well, what do? We walk in on a Monday morning, and we, as operations people, we go, what was our service level? Right? Think about that. Why do we ask that? How many calls do we answer within? Actually, that's not a question to ask. The question that we should be asking is, how happy were our customers over the weekend? How happy were our agents over the weekend? Because those two together give amazing service and give that satisfaction. But we don't. We go, let's look at something else, which actually, is tangible in some people's minds, and then we can beat each other up with it. It's interesting.
It is a really interesting one. And actually, you're talking a lot about data and analytics. Earlier, we mentioned AI. So how are they reshaping the customer service experience in this virtual contact center?
So AI is being pushed, but AI in its purest form, I don't think exists within our contact center. It's a form of we call it artificial intelligence, but it's clever bots. And I think the interesting thing is, because things like ChatGPT have become mainstream, it's the fastest growing app ever. So I believe it took something like Spotify 9 months or 2 years, whatever it was, to reach 1 million users. I can't remember the exact numbers. It took about 3 months or something for ChatGPT to explode, But ChatGPT is not what anyone's ever going to really deploy into their contact center, because it's using the overall internet as its language model. And that's really what it's doing. It's going, well, we've got some information. How can I go out to my language model, which is in this case the internet, and pull in the information? And there's a lot of what they call hallucinations that take place within the stuff that gets pulled back if you were to do that. So what you've then got to do is go, I've got AI to you, and what the AI is going to do is essentially properly understand what your customers are asking, and it will use your natural language processing, natural language understanding, to sort of figure out what they're doing, what they're asking for, and then provide within your own curated essential language model and knowledge the answers back. But it's not Sentinel, right? It's not going to be able to just go, well, you know what Reese wanted today, and this is the answer. And because it just doesn't work like that. And, it's getting better. So how you build an AI agent, from where I looked at this maybe 3 years ago and what was involved in doing that, to what's involved today and how it can self-generate its own. So there's one I use where you can just put in, I want to build an HR support agent, and it will go to the internet and it will create its own workflows, etc., etc. But you're never going to do that either, because you can't go to the internet and just go let loose and do whatever it's got to be controlled. It's got to be created. You need people who understand language. You need to understand people who understand development to do that well. It comes back to almost the theme of what I've been saying. Is be clear about what you want to use it for. It's great. It's absolutely great. Before we started this call, I was telling you about how many Alexas I've got in the house. my whole house is automated with, with in inverted commas AI, but it's not really, is it? It's not AI as it's going to go out and solve things, but it's serving a purpose. And I've created my home environment because I wanted to do these things. If you're clear about what you want your artificial intelligence, your bot to do, absolutely great. But you've also got to be clear about what you don't want it to do and create those escape routes. So someone starts asking something which it can't deal with, don't try and, what they'd say, style it out within the bot, because you'll fall unstuck very, very fast. The clever part, I think, is the bit where it recognizes can't deal with this, and you get it through to an agent. And you would hope that the bulk of things that agents that you want the bot to deal with can get dealt with, and you leave the other stuff for the agents, right? But again, you've got to be careful with that, because I was chatting with someone the other day who said, we've managed to increase our occupancy, by 10%, we're at 85% occupancy. I went, right, is that good? Is that going to improve your overall agent experience? Where do you end? Do you stop at 90? Do you stop at 95%? Right? Because what actually happens to your agents at that point? You start burning them out. And they're only dealing with the difficult, hard core inquiries. All the stuff that gave them a little bit of a break because that was easy is now being pushed to one side. So the landscape of work that an agent deals with now, when you're thinking about, in the modern AI world, is different. Right? So we've got to be mindful of that as well, I think.
Completely off script and everything that we've discussed previously. What's the sort of shift in talent makeup you need there then? So obviously you're saying there's a change due to the technology in the sort of queries and problems that your agents are now dealing with. What have you seen a shift in skill set or a shift in behavior that you need now within those within those agents?
I think you need to be, because you're being left to work by yourself, you've got to be, I think, more of your motivation levels have got to be greater, because you're at home. You haven't got that team leader standing over you going, come on, answer the phone, we've got calls waiting. You've got to be that self-starter. I think that we have to be careful is how we train our colleagues, because you've got this push towards, which I agree with, by the way. I think agent assist has got its place, but not at a cost of not training people properly. And I've heard people talk about, well, we can massively reduce time to competency because we don't have to train them in this. It'll just be pushed to them as they go through their jobs. The AI will pick up, that's what the call is about, and push the answers based on knowledge articles or whatever to the agent. But I think we have to be cautious of that, because actually the brain is very important, the way that it reacts is better than the AI. And at the moment, the AI is nowhere near what our own conscious can do. And actually having that knowledge stored and actually being able to do that, what I would call mental gymnastics in those circumstances, I think is important. And if we take that away, you almost become, the sort of almost a scripted response, and those agents can't do stuff which they perhaps historically could have done. So again, nothing wrong with it, but just be mindful that if you're going to have a team of people at the end of all of this, they've got to be clear about the knowledge and making sure that you're continuously developing them. The AI needs to be continuously developed. A lot of people will, well, I don't know, I will say to people, don't think of an AI or a bot as something that's going to replace your agents in its whole. That's something that you need to teach and learn, and it needs to be trained and continuously trained, like you would with a human agent. So, and also don't then neglect your human agents because you go, do you know what, I've got a bot. The two go hand in hand, the two can support each other, but you've got to be really, really clear about the purpose and why you're doing that. What's the outcomes you're trying to achieve? Are you really going to give a better customer service by this human to human interaction, and what's the repercussion of not doing that? Do you lose out on your repeat business? Do you become, because customer loyalty, I mean, maybe I'm reaching that point in my life where I'm looking at things perhaps in the wrong way, but I think customer loyalty, customer advocacy is important, right? But what's interesting is then you start looking at some of the new Chase Bank, which is one of the few companies I'll mention here. But Chase Bank just put an advert out. I saw it on the tube recently, and they've just put an advert on the TV where they say, talk to a human, not a bot. And we're saying that now as our USP, and that almost straight away says, in their view, talking to a human is better than the bot that we can provide them. And I know that there's a couple of companies I deal with who have been pushing self-serve for a long time. And now I've chatted with one of them and they said, we're going to start unwinding some of this because, where things like mobile phones, broadband and things like that are highly competitive. And if we've driven the customer loyalty out of it, well, what's left to distinguish between the two? Well, all right, my broadband always works and I'm always getting the speeds and I don't care, do I? Right? But then what happens when something goes wrong? How do we deal with it? And that hugely influences people in just how quickly people can resolve issues. And that should be, if we're talking about working on a customer service contact center industry, it should be a priority, because those customers pay our wages. They're important. And the minute we start neglecting those customers, well, I think I'll go some way to answer some of the things that people are talking about at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, if I think about my buying process and my decision making, actually, I won't name names. I was with a broadband provider for 8 years, and actually, as a result of their methodology and their customer service at the renewal time, I actually decided to jump ship because my problems weren't being helped in some respects. So I jumped ship, and you're talking about customer loyalty. The question is their customer service experience then causing that break? So it's a good point. It is a good point.
I put out a LinkedIn post a few months ago, and I just said, have we stopped caring about customer service? Genuine question, actually. Do we care? Does it matter anymore? And do the consumers, so I'm of that age where I still think it's important. I've got a graduate who's working in my team, and his view is somewhat different. Does he care whether his mobile phone provider cares about him? Possibly not. As long as my phone works, I don't care what they think of me. There is that different view, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps that is it. Perhaps that is part of
that's
it.
a long-term sustainable thing. I don't know, because it's all right at this moment in time. If you're an 18-year-old and all you want to do is make sure your phone works, and I don't care whether someone is bothered about me. But does there come a point, and what does that mean for customer service for the next 30 years, 40 years? How does that affect society? I know that's getting a bit deep, perhaps, but if we all stop caring about things which once were important, then what does that mean? That we just not care about each other, and it's to say not what we're here to discuss.
No, that's a much deeper subject, isn't it?
But it still, I think, has an influence. About I mean, I always remember when I came, I was over in South Africa, and I came back here, and I came to London. So I decided I'm going to go to work in London, and I remember going into some shops, and it staggered me how people could serve me without speaking to me. So you could go, and I went into an electrical store and I bought something, and I literally put it there. It went through. They held their hand out. I put my or pointed at the thing. I put my card in. I think I went to a shop to buy some milk, and the person was on the phone to someone else. Put their hand out. I put some money in their hand. They gave me the change, and off I went. And I didn't speak to anyone. And that struck me as a bit strange. I thought, but is that what we want? Is that what is representative of what an organization wants for its customers? And arguably not.
Most definitely not. I think if you transpose that experience then into a larger environment and actually going into your contact centers, most definitely it's not what people are looking for. I think it comes back to what you were saying, though, address the root cause, and a lot of it won't be needed. But actually, I want to bring it back to, I want to try and pick your brains a little bit and get a little bit of predictions for the future. So, from your professional perspective, what predictions can you make about the future of virtual contact centers, assuming, of course, the ongoing rise of remote work?
Yeah, I think remote work is here to stay. As much as I will question it, I think it is here to stay, and it does serve a purpose. It really does. It can help a lot of people. I work from home the majority of time. I think the savings I've made in not having to get on a train and the train being difficult to get onto. So I will say to people, actually, I really like going to work. It's the going part I don't particularly enjoy. Um, I think hybrid is here to stay, and I think I can't imagine how we'd have managed our children starting, because my kids started going to school at the start of the pandemic, and so we've never had a time where we've had to be at work and manage. So that for me is a whole new thing. So I think it's here to stay. I think that um, as we start getting the technology right and honed and deployed well, executed well, I think the overall experience will improve. Um, and I think we'll move back towards, some better attrition. I'm seeing triple figures attrition in some organizations at the moment, which is scary. 26 years ago when I started out in this, people would say to me, if you got 100% attrition, you were doing good. Right. And I remember going, how can we accept that as a concept? Overall, as an industry, over the last sort of 25 years, you saw, attrition come down to something akin to other industries. It's gone back up again. Different people will tell you different numbers. And I think we need to understand properly why that is. I think there is an element of employee loyalty. If you never meet anyone from work, or you rarely meet anyone from work, then you don't get loyalty. You don't have the friendships. You don't have the social element, which actually a lot of people value, and we used to value in the contact center world. That's one of the I think certain people liked working in contact centers because of that. So I think it's here to stay. I think the technology will improve that overall experience. I think that we've got to reshape our heads a little bit around what agents are there for, and actually move back towards contact center as a profession. We have CCAS, don't we? Contact center as a service. That's the technology. Let's think about CCAP. Is that right? Contact center as a profession. Let's start thinking about that, because again, the contact center historically was a door open, wasn't it, into other areas of the business. So I know people who worked with me who became accountants or became other, went into other areas and did very, very well. But their door, the street door to the business was the contact center. And we've got to be careful not to lose that, and developing, using the tech that we've got, using the tools that are available to us to develop that loyalty, to make people feel part of the organization, be brand advocates for the company that you work for. Not this, well, I'll work here for 3 months and I'll go somewhere else because I can, and it's might give me a little bit more money, or there might be a little benefit. That transience there I don't think is right. So, but I think we've got to just calm down a bit and go, right, you know what, we've just come out of a pandemic. It's not that long ago. Let's look at what we've got. Let's regroup, and let's really think about strategically what is it we're trying to do. And every business is different. Every person is different, and different people have different needs. Opening up that talent pool, as you said at the beginning, and we've touched upon a couple of times, I think it's really, really good. And I think it allows, particularly, you've got, I know a couple of organizations who are really leveraging the slightly older generation, because that's the demographic of their customer base, and they couldn't do that before. because that group of people didn't want to work in a contact center. So it does, but I think it doesn't. We've got to be careful we don't become complacent. And because someone wags their finger at you and says, attrition is this now, and agents don't care, and no one wants to work in a contact center, and all the other things that go with it, as long as we don't fall into the trap of believing that. We've done it once before. We turned an industry. They used to call it. Remember, they called it the sweatshop, didn't they? The sweatshop of the. We've turned that to a credible, important industry, and we've got to make sure that we don't let that slide back again. And there's no reason why it should. We've got, as I said, we've got more technology than we've ever had before. We've got to understand how to use it, how to get the best out of it, to leverage it. And not, people are buying bits of kit at the moment, and it's not cheap. The licensing on a per agent per month model is very, very different and pretty much more expensive than buying a bit of kit and putting it in a server room and amortizing that over 5 years. You've got, it's an ongoing monthly cost, which is expensive. So you should not be then sitting there with a 20-30% utilization on the kit that you've bought. Get the most out of it, but then buy the right kit. So really understand what is it you want to do. Pretty much anything you want to do can be done. But, if you say, I want to go and build a bot that's going to service my customers, be clear about what those boundaries are, what can be serviced and what can't be serviced, and make sure your process are adapting to, what your customers are looking for. And customers evolve. We know that. As younger people.
I suppose the other element of it is you're talking about being clear of what the kit is as well, but also be clear of the individual that you're trying to hire to actually, service the customers when that kit doesn't meet the needs of what you're looking for.
It's an interesting one. I remember having a conversation with someone about we'd gone in to talk to this chap, and he was talking about how his agents, what his agents, they're doing my head in there. He was just complaining about his agents. And I said to him, look, let's just go through the process as a thought experiment. So it's like, who decided you needed to do some recruitment? Who wrote the ad? Who decided where to put the ad? Who then sifted through the responses you got from the ad? Who invited people in for interview? Who interviewed the people? Who offered the job? Who then trained them? Who passed their probation? Yet it's their fault.
It's the accountability throughout all of it.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, this has been a really insightful discussion, and I think we could keep going for absolute hours between the pair of us. But I just want to say a massive thank you to our guest, Chris Souza, for sharing his expertise and insight. And thank you once again to our listeners for tuning in to The Big Question. If you found today's episode enlightening, be sure to subscribe to our podcast to hear more compelling conversations. Catch you next time on The Big Question. You've been listening to The Big Question podcast, brought to you by Brook Street, part of the leading global workforce solutions company, Manpower Group. To find out more about how we can support your business and give you access to the best talent in the market, visit www.brookstreet.co.uk/employer-services.